This is Thoughts, The Haunting, 1963 Robert Wise film. Yes, The Haunting, based on The Haunting of Hill House, not to be confused with The House on Haunted Hill. This video will contain no comparison between the two versions of the movie in this video. Yeah, I'm going with it. As I have not watched the 1991 one. Yeah, the movie version of this that came out in 1999. I have not watched that movie because I'm not a masochist. If you don't care about these disclaimers, I try to keep them short and relevant, but your mileage may vary, you can skip right ahead to the section of your choice through the description box. I try to talk very fast during the disclaimer since a lot of it is very standard information. I'm not going to keep speaking this fast once I get into the video itself. Now, this contains spoilers, including for the book. I might bring up the other work of some of the people who made it, but I don't intend to spoil, and certainly if I'm going to spoil anything other than this movie and the book it's adapting, I will, like, warn before it, yeah, it's still going, and, like, hold up an index finger so you can skip it, and lower the index finger once I'm done with the spoilers. Now, let's see. Content warning / trigger warning. I am going to be discussing the potentially triggering content of this movie, mental illness and hallucinations. Now, let's see. Yes, I might discuss how there's almost no violence in this, and certainly what violence there is entirely implied. But I do want to make clear I don't have a problem with violence and gore in general. The Thing is one of my favorite horror movies and movies in general. I also love Cronenberg's The Fly, Videodrome, etc. And let's see. I don't intend to swear in this video since there's no swearing in the movie itself. Now, let's see. Yeah, just real quick. The reason I say the year this came out, what medium it is to clear up confusion as to which I'm reviewing between properties with the same title as each other. And yes, according to Wikipedia, there are several other things you might think this actually is. Now, I am recording this basically right after finishing watching the movie. It appears to, yeah, it's still going, so I don't know what that warning is about. Okay. Now, let's see. Yeah. This is not a review. This is a series of, well, thoughts. Some of it is analysis, some of it is MST3K riff tracks, and other jokes, especially jokes in the first section. The first section is thoughts that I had while watching in chronological order. You can think of it as a running commentary or live tweeting or the like. The second section is thoughts that I had before watching, including my responses to various YouTube videos, including trailers, analysis, etc. DVD extras. This is also the section for anything I thought of entirely on my own that wasn't a response to something and that I thought of, well, before watching. Timecodes in the description box. And the final section, I get into stuff I think is worthwhile to get into on Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, IMDb, and Wikipedia. And before recording this vlog, I had read all but the, what's it called? The IMDb user reviews. And I will admit I have definitely forgotten at least some of what I've read since I prepare for these weeks ahead, sometimes a month or more. If you're not interested in the contents of all three sections, I invite you to only watch the ones you are interested in. Now, let's see. I try not to review films that fall into genres that I don't like. I realize an argument can be made in favor of talking about genres that you don't like, but it's not really what I want to do with these videos. I don't particularly like the idea of giving a negative review to something wherein basically I say this is not the kind of thing that I would ever like, and because of that, it is a bad movie. That's just not the kind of reviews I want to do. And no, I'm not saying every review by someone who doesn't like it is necessarily that kind of review. Now, let's see. As much as I love the horror genre, it does tend to treat women badly. They're often disposable. There are a lot of misogynist tropes. They're quote-unquote useless, they're not strong, they're sexualized against their will, and are only there for that purpose. This movie does quite well on that. I think an argument could be made that Theo is a tad... I mean, it's very obvious that she's gay. You know, they made it as obvious as they could without getting, like, you know, the censorship back then was very strict. And as far as I understand, especially when it came to, you know, anything considered outside of the norm. So, any, you know, sexuality that wasn't straight. And it is... I will say it's not as bad as it could be, and she is still... she's sometimes very... you know, very positively depicted character, and certainly I don't think that it ever really makes her... like, she's sometimes jealous, you know, when she finds John and Nellie together, she can sometimes get very jealous, but that's not really... I don't know, I guess it is in part a trope of gay people, but it is also in part a trope of just, you know, representations of women, whether straight or gay. But yeah, the I think there was a lot of room for them making Nellie very, you know, almost a victim, because she is, you know, there's no doubt that she has some mental problems. You know, you know, one could read the movie as a lot of it being that she's, you know, that a lot of it is in her head. Now, let's see, but yeah, with that said, she's, you know, she stands up for herself, and she makes good arguments, you know, such as at the, you know, in her first scene when she's arguing why she should be allowed to take the car. And yeah, you know, none of the women are disposable. There is maybe a little bit, I feel like some of the depiction of the fear of the women is maybe that they're maybe made out to be overly, you know, it's they're too emotional, that sort of thing. But yeah, none of them are useless. All three of them are strong. You know, when there's something they want, they will make an argument for it. They will stand up for what they feel without it being played as, you know, there's that one, you know, Luke says there's only one way to argue with a woman, Doc, don't. But that comes across as more that Luke is kind of, you know, let's go with he has casual relationships with women. You know, more than that what he's saying is actually right. And yeah, you know, it's from 1963, so it's not, there's not a lot of sexuality, but yeah, it is very clear Nellie is interested in John. And, you know, I already mentioned Theo is clearly interested in Nellie. And let's see, I would say Luke is probably interested in Theo as well. Now, yeah, so let's see. Right, and yeah, another thing is horror movies often treat those with mental problems as being dangerous rather than frequently the victims of violence. And yeah, again, like, Nellie is not really shown as someone who's dangerous. She, you know, she's clearly not respected. There are a lot of people that don't respect her because of the, you know, her issues, and that's basically, there's never really any threat. Like, think of how easy it would have been for her to, like, once John climbs the spiral staircase, how easy would it have been for the movie to throw in that she like tries to push him off the, down onto the floor, or, something. I will say that she is clearly very, she's very ready for the house to kill her a lot of the time, not all of the time. And I think, an argument could be made that that is a bit much. But then at the same time, she does express depression. She says she sleeps on the left side because read that it wears the heart out quicker. She literally tells John to his face, I don't want to live very long. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, yeah, I really appreciate how much respect it has, and how much interest it shows in her issues. It really is not interested in just painting her as just crazy. Really, every time someone is like treating her badly, as the movie always paints them as in the wrong. You've got the ah, I guess cousin. I've never been good at the whole thing. Her sister's daughter, and let's see, Theo a couple of times. Yeah. Now, this movie is, once again, as a horror movie, it is extremely important not to overexpose the threat. And this movie does an incredible job. I mean, I know some people are going to say, of course it does, it never shows anything, but it must have been very, like, we got, if you're not very familiar with it, I recommend, sincerely, because I think they're legitimately very, very entertaining, and I don't think you have to make fun of them for that to be the case, but horror movies from, like, the 50s and such, like, sci-fi horror movies tended to be very direct back then. There was not necessarily a lot of hinting. As soon as they could, like, what they could do effects-wise, they would do. And yeah, I think, and another thing, given that it doesn't really show anything, this movie doesn't, I'm very impressed at how well it does at maintaining the threat. After a while, you do realize watching the movie, if at all you take a step back and consider, after a while, you realize this movie is never going to show me anything, because, like, early on you might think that it will eventually, but after a while you realize it, and it still manages to be incredibly tense throughout. Like, the making a good horror movie is difficult under any circumstances, because building, maintaining, and eventually releasing tension and suspense is difficult. If you've ever, I personally recommend anyone, I think it's a very illuminating experience to try to edit, a horror scene, to try to build and maintain suspense, because it is very, very difficult. And I don't personally know, honestly, I figure you can probably find, like, clips, video editing software. It's not difficult to come by ones that are really great for free, although, some will plant, like, a big, watermark in the middle of the screen if you don't pay. But if you can live with that, and yeah, I mean, yeah, you can on YouTube, you can find, here on YouTube, where you already are, if you're watching this, you can find clips from horror movies. Download some of them, and, pick them apart and try to re-edit. It's legitimately very difficult, or at least try to maybe try to slowly go through it. You don't even have to re-edit. Just notice where it cuts, what it cuts to, how long the cuts are, all these kinds of things. And this movie has to do it without showing anything. And I mean, if you want to really boil it down, the entire movie, it's sounds that you don't know the source of, and you know camera moves, lenses, camera lenses, acting, writing, and music. You know, that is, and editing. Some of the time it's also very much the editing, and that really shouldn't work. It definitely shouldn't work. You know, by the time I was even born, you know, this movie, I'm much younger than this movie is, which I hope is still noticeable when you look at my face. And the first time I watched this, I had watched tons of movies that are drenched in visual effects. You know, I will freely admit, I haven't watched that many movies from this far back, especially not horror movies. The ones I have watched tend to be the sci-fi horror kind, and tend to be from the 50s, not the 60s. You know, most of the 60s movies I've watched, probably stuff like James Bond and westerns and such, you know. But it works, you know, if you let yourself go with the movie, and you're okay with, you know, the various things that, you know, but yeah, like, I'm not sure how many directors today could do, you know, well, I suppose, to be fair, I'm afraid I forget her name right now, but the director of The Babadook, because The Babadook also doesn't have very much that is, yeah, but you know, if you compare this movie to horror movies made much more recently, it has, excuse me, it has a lot less tools at its disposal, and the fact that it works, and works as well as it does, is legitimately incredible. You know, I think it might have been Doug Walker and Rob Walker. You know, Doug Walker, who portrays the nostalgia critic, who pointed out that a lot of the camera work that Sam Raimi really loves, you know, this was what inspired it, you know, and I can't even imagine. I think he's an incredibly talented director, but I have a hard time imagining his movies without effects work. And I'm not saying, you know, I also think that's a credit to the people who do the effects work. You know, in his more recent movies, it's visual effects, but in the earliest ones he did, you know, it's like, am I remembering it right? Is there actual claymation in some of his early? I feel like that's the case, and maybe some stop motion as well. And you know, yeah, and it's incredibly effective. But I have a hard, I can't even imagine his movies with no effects. I really don't think they would be anywhere near as, you know. But this one manages, and it's deeply impressive. And I don't I don't blame those who find that it just doesn't work for them. Let's see now. I might criticize this movie, but I am going to try to keep in mind when it was made. Although I suppose I've already made that pretty clear. And just the what they had to work with. You know, I've never found it all that useful to criticize something. Like, if you want to say you know, it's fine to maybe make it clear, you know, this movie didn't have the biggest budget, but don't waste people's time by just going on and on about it. You know, mention it once, maybe give a couple of very illuminating examples, and then move on. Nobody needs to hear you spend forever talking about all the different things that they couldn't do because of, yeah. Let's see. I got this movie on sale, so anything negative I say in this is not out of bitterness. I also do not feel like the movie wasted my time. Nobody forced me to watch it or to make this video. It's not that I'm upset at how this compares to what it's adapting, other movies like it, other work by the people making it. I don't have any kind of personal vendetta against anyone who worked on making it. To the best of my ability, the negative things I say in this are fair criticisms based on budget, when it came out, what it was trying to achieve, etc. But I'm probably not going to say very many negative things about it. I absolutely love this movie. Now, I first watched this in 2010, and I'm not 100% certain if I've watched it since. It's possible that I have as much as twice since. And then today I watched it, you know, once again, almost right before clicking record. My making jokes in this should not be taken as me thinking the thing I'm joking about is actually bad, me wanting to make light of the subject, etc. I simply find it very difficult not to anesthetically and overanalyze everything I watch. Now, my own quote-unquote film critic rating for this, yeah, honestly, it's a 10 out of 10, and that's also my personal rating. I, without reserve, give this 10 incredibly terrifying houses, whether you look at them from the outside or the inside, out of 10. Now, let's see. Yeah. RIP to each of the now deceased people who worked on this. I don't think I'm going to be discussing whether I believe in the supernatural or not in this video. You know, if you don't know from any of my other videos and you don't want to know, I don't intend to reveal it in this video. Now, that brings us to the first section, which is called Notes Taken While Watching. I have a lot of empathy for Nell, so I'm probably going to call out nearly every time she asserts herself and, you know, calls out other people, you know, points out to people that she deserves better than she's getting. And yeah, there are going to be a bunch of jokes in this section. Think of it as whistling in the dark. I've got to do something to keep my nerves in check during this movie. The opening narration is word for word from the book, I'm pretty sure. And in fact, if I recall, that is exactly how the book opens as well. So, you know, and it's basically the first impression you really get of the movie. You know, it doesn't show you a lot before you get the narration. In the book, you don't know who's saying it. You know, it's basically an omnipresent narrator or something. I appreciate the decision to not make it an omnipresent narrator in the movie, but to give the line to Dr. Markway. You know, yeah, I should briefly clarify, not everything he says in the opening is exactly the same, but the first little bit of it, you know, the first couple of lines are word for word from the book, and then it goes into him explaining it was exactly what I needed. At that point, obviously it's not some narrator. I watch, you know, basically every movie I can watch with, you know, subtitles that are in English for the hearing impaired. I always put those on. For this, right after the lightning strike and title reveal, the subtitles say eerie music becomes dreamlike, which I think is an excellent way to describe it. It was built 90 odd, very odd. That's a good line. That's a good line. The crash is so effective, even though literally all we see is a horse getting scared, a wheel spinning, part of which is broken, and then the hand like falling into frame. Our imagination fills in the rest, and it's incredibly effective. Like, I have seen movies that have spent thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars putting together a carefully, elaborately staged and edited scene. And some of those are much less effective than this. I'm not saying none of them are more effective, but like, they really, incredible craftsmanship in this movie. The fall down the stairs is also horrifying. Good stunt work, and man, is that a horrifying looking face after she lands at the bottom of the steps. By the by, excellent decision on... I mean, she does straight up fall backwards, which makes it even scarier. She can't even see where she's falling. And then she lands, and the head is upside down, and the eyes are just... Wow, that is... Yeah. Also very deeply effective as we see Abigail go from a child to an adult woman to a senior frickin' citizen. And, you know, as the old woman dies, we see her drop the cane or whatever it is. Considering how little death there is in the rest of the movie, they sure managed to pack in a lot of death in the first 6.5 minutes, which actually is more like 4 minutes because the opening credits are about 2.5 minutes, the first 2.5 minutes. So, okay, let's see. There's the horse-drawn carriage crash, which kills one person. Then you have the... I might get these in the wrong order, sorry. Then you have the person falling down the stairs. You have Abigail dying old, and then you have the person tending to her hanging herself. So 4 people. And I think, I think Hugh dies in there at, it's just we don't see that. So it's... But that does make 5, I guess. Yeah, 5 people. That's... Yeah. I mean, for the entire rest of the movie, the only other person who's going to die is Eleanor. So it's a good way to sort of get that out of the way, because this really isn't a movie where you're constantly, like... There aren't that many situations where the danger is very clear. There's Nell almost falling backwards off the balcony, and then later the spiral staircase. Let's just make an entire, let's count it as one. Okay, so 1 is Nell almost falling backwards off the... I just said it, so if you forgot the word 2, you can rewind and look at what I said. Then there's spiral staircase parts 1 and 2. I mean, I guess that's pretty much it. And then there at the end, you have the car crash. That's literally... So 3 overall bits where there's a very clear danger. And the rest of the time, it's basically that you're afraid that whatever is pounding on the door is actually going to get in. But there isn't a very clear, So yeah, it's... Yeah. So it's a good idea for them to put a lot of death right up front, to get that out of the way so that we can focus on... I mean, it's almost more that it's almost like we're in the room with them, listening to the pounding, more than a very clear, yeah, excuse me, a very clear threat, excuse me. And I have to give huge props to the restraint that every time you have one of these scenes of the pounding, it doesn't cut out of the room. It doesn't like show, well, what are the men doing while this? No, no, no. Let's stay in the room. Let's stay in the room for these several minutes of pounding. And every so often, there's just sudden complete silence. And it's like to the point where you're like, was I just imagining? Wasn't there pounding just a second ago? I could have sworn there was pounding. Why is there no more pound? You know, and then the pounding returns, and you immediately wish you hadn't questioned where the pounding went. You know, but yeah, several minutes. And I also appreciate. I mean, at the end of the day, there really is only those. Is it 3 total? I guess you've got. Or is it only 2? It might only be 2 actually, because people who didn't have a lot of restraint might put 5 scenes in there where it's pounding, and at that point it would stop. Honestly, at that point I think it would become like parody. You know, it wouldn't be scary anymore. It would become silly and funny. You know, I was watching Count Dracula from the Planet Dracula. I want to say it was his review, and I realize this is ancient. Forgive me the brief digression here, but I feel like it was his review of, what's it called, Return of the Living Dead, I think, where he points out that horror and comedy are often paired because what is scary to some could be funny to others. And I think this, you know, any horror movie that isn't, you know, that is not a comedy has to walk a delicate balance, and this does a really great job. And part of it is that afterwards the characters will laugh about it, in part in relief, but also, you know, Eleanor points out, you know, they're like, what did we miss? And she's like, oh, nothing, except someone was knocking on the door with a cannonball. I realize I'm delivering the line a bit differently than she is, but just, you know, she's pointing out how ridiculous it is, and that allows us all to just breathe a sigh of relief, as like, you know, just the movie is aware how ridiculous these things are, but because it delivers them so well, at the time, we're not thinking about how ridiculous they are. We only get to that afterwards, and then it's like, I wasn't. You were scared though. I wasn't scared. I was never scared. You know, and that makes it a lot more. There are movies that can manage to be non-stop terrifying for the duration, and those are some of the best horror movies. But not all horror movies have to be that. And I don't think this would have been able to. I don't think this movie would have worked as well if it was non-stop terror. Luke hopes to one day live off Hill House, but he never imagined living in it. I appreciate the skepticism towards the supernatural that a number of the characters express. I mean, really, at the end of the day, almost none of them straight up believe it. There's just that, you know, Theo and Nell had experiences in their own lives, and Markway wants to document it and prove, you know, he wants to discover what's actually going on. But basically, I guess maybe the Dudleys. The Dudleys might believe that there's something supernatural going on in the house. But basically everybody else, you know, to varying degrees, don't really believe that there's... I guess Nell, over the course of the movie, does come to believe it. But yeah, you happen to be in my bedroom. I pay a good deal of rent for it. Now get out before I show you what my nerves can really do. So why do people hate her character? She's awesome. Left pillar, and when you get back, please explain to me how there's any audience who doesn't think you're awesome. I remembered it as there being too much narration over the course of the movie. Honestly, I'm not sure I still think that that really is the case. I don't know, I mean, the first times before when I watched it, it's only very recently that I listened through the audiobook. So now I know, I mean, in the book, Nell really lives in her head. She is constantly questioning what people are thinking about what she's doing and saying and wearing and where she's going and, you know, everything. She's constantly overanalyzing everything. So it would be a huge disservice if there was just not very much narration. I think, count your blessings. There could have been way more. She is constantly overthinking everything in the book, so it could have been much, much more. But still, I think it's the appropriate amount, personally. I'm starting to think, should I think of something negative to say about the movie? I'm not entirely sure I can. I'll try, just so people don't think it's completely. Let's see. It's not that I think the movie can do no wrong. I just don't think it does very much wrong. I think one of actually it might be the very first bit of narration from her. We get she points out just how long she's wanted this kind of thing. It is quite important to note that one of the first things we hear her, her say, even it's her inner voice, but is I'll never have to leave, which right away tells us that her relationship to the house is already very unhealthy. And Nellie asserts herself, getting Dudley to open the gate, and then drives before he's fully clear, like a boss, like a freaking badass. And I'm pretty sure that is the turn we see her make is in fact where the horse-drawn carriage, crashed, and where she crashes at the end of the movie as well. And her inner monologue before she enters the house is also very important. I guess you could maybe say because of how much the book has been trimmed down for the movie, it does maybe end up feeling a little bit like Nellie is a little over the place when it comes to her relationship to the house, because some of the time she's very happy there and she's like, oh, it wants me here, that I'm being invited, and then other times she's really scared and upset. I feel like the book, it's more smooth, but I'm not sure. I don't think the movie should be longer than it is. I also don't think it should be shorter. But that is maybe something. It's again like the book is entirely. As far as I recall, it's entirely from her perspective. A lot of it is her inner monologue, and because of that, there gets to be room for the sort of thing of yeah. I mean, in the book, after she takes the car, then there's a while where she's driving and she's thinking about how she took the car, and justifying I helped pay for the car. Then she gets some food at like what's it called, like a cafe or diner or some sort of thing, and she overanalyzes what she's saying to the waitress there, and or is that not called a waitress? Whatever it's called, and just every yeah, if you find the movie spends too much time on her and her thoughts and such, you would probably hate the book. Was there a miniseries adaptation of the book? I feel like I maybe saw that there was. And that makes a lot of sense because I honestly do think that all of the material in the book could work on screen. And let's see, yeah, it would have to be a miniseries or something. There's too much there for a single movie to handle. I appreciate that Mrs. Dudley is about as unwelcoming as her husband, but in a different way. She opens the door to Eleanor basically immediately. Here, this is your room. I found some evidence that I speak. Mrs. Dudley explains in explicit detail, yes, I meant to say both, just how little help she's going to be if there is, if something dangerous does happen. In the night, in the dark. She said that twice in about 2 minutes. Is it her catchphrase? Theo is way more indifferent to Mrs. Dudley's warnings than Nell, which is hilarious. And Eleanor makes fun of Mrs. Dudley, giving Theo the exact same warning. It's like, did she rehearse this in the mirror or something? And for a couple of seconds, Mrs. Dudley smiles, and you think, okay, there's, a little bit of, she realizes what this sounds like, but then it turns cold, and she repeats the warning to Theo, and just, yeah. At that point, you realize the smile was almost like a, you won't be joking in a day or two. You will not be joking about this. And you can tell when Theo meets Eleanor, there's just a little bit of something going on with her. I appreciate that it's not really depicted as a bad thing that she's gay. It's just it's there a little bit. Although I have seen some say that she's kind of predatory. I guess I can see an argument for that. I don't know. Maybe it's just because by now, like, I've seen movies that depict homosexuality as homosexual individuals as far more like predatory than this does. Yeah, I guess it is there. That is true. There's Theo in velvet, so I must be Eleanor in tweed. That's from the book, I think word for word. In the book it goes on for a bit longer, but I don't blame them for trimming it. And I really appreciate that at least part of it made it in there to get some of the fun of it, and they get the point of it across. This sort of coy thing. Yeah. In the book, the two men join in, and they go on for a bit. There's a number of lines of it, and it is a lot of fun. But I think it would have felt, in the movie, it would have felt like they're getting bogged down. I'm hungry. Hello, hungry. I'm Dr. Markway. I really enjoy Markway telling Theo she's wrong about which door to open, and then he walks into a broom closet. And she actually was right. When they do open the door that she indicated, that turns out to be the right one, which I guess is probably supposed to be the ESP at work. I appreciate that for several seconds, we only see Luke's shadow approach, and legitimately we're not quite sure if there is going to be a person or suddenly the shadow is just going to disappear or something. And that actually, I think that's the very first time we even see him, so he's introduced like that. That's very, yeah. You mean you didn't research this place before coming here? In their defense, Google won't be invented for about 44 years. Theo looks slightly uncomfortable when Dr. Markway praises her for detecting 19, excuse me, out of 20 cards. And Nell, of course, insists that the poltergeist incident she experienced when younger isn't real. What would you call this place? Funorama? Diseased? Sick? Crazy, if you like. Miss Jackson, if you nasty. And then Nell says, it was the neighbors who threw the rocks. So she's been sitting there trying to come up with an explanation, or maybe just working up the nerve to say that for the couple of minutes that have passed since John brought up the poltergeist. You know, like several minutes have passed, the conversation has moved on, and this is it's a good. It really shows, you know, she really lives in her head. She is, yeah, she has a very hard time letting these kinds of things go. You know, she feels like she has to adequately explain why that wasn't a poltergeist. You know, when everyone else has already moved on. And I've known a lot of people like her, and once again, I have a lot of empathy for people like that. And she also refers to, you know, she says, you know, my mother says, as if her mother were still alive, and she's invoking her mother to explain something away, as if she were still a child herself. What's wrong? I had a feeling. What? A feeling? Beats believing. We could always break out. I had forgotten how much Nell is, you know, how much of her wit is in the movie that they brought over from the book. Honestly, I feel like not a lot of reviews bring that up. They kind of just write her off as this kind of one-note mentally ill character when there's clearly more there. And Theo clearly wants to spend a little bit more time with Nell, who says that she's tired. And, you know, I can see how, you know, Theo wants to be alone with her, and that's where the idea of, you know, a gay individual as predatory comes. The pounding is really creepy. At first, Nell thinks that her mother is still alive, and that, you know, the reason for the pounding is that, you know, she wants her help again. And the pounding grows louder, and the two young women on screen are as terrified as the audience is. And the camera tracks across the wall as though there really is something on the other side of the wall. That's really great. You know, and it does, like, the sound it seems as though there's something, and it's gradually moving, you know, on the other side of the wall, which again really works to make it even creepier. The pounding even by itself is creepy, and when you add to it, this thing of, you know, like, it's almost like, is it trying to break down the door by hitting it so hard, and then it moves a little to maybe try to find a place, and a different place to get through. The loud pounding on the door is legitimately terrifying. It gets increasingly scary, especially once the two women are both in the bed. And then the doorknob starts turning, and it's just like, I don't blame anyone who turns the movie off at that point. That's just, you know what? I'm sold. The house is haunted. I'm leaving. Positively exquisite camera work as it tracks on the door. Honestly, throughout the entire movie, it's great. Luke and John come by, and the two women realize only they could hear the pounding. And it's such a relief when the two women laugh and describe it as knocking with a cannonball, finding relief at the fact that, Luke is like, well, the door doesn't have a scratch on it, and Eleanor is like, perfect, it didn't mar the woodwork. Wouldn't you say that something somehow is trying to separate us? Over the course of the movie, you really come to understand Eleanor. We get a lot of insights. Again, the thing with sleeping on her left side to wear out her heart quicker, and the bit about human nature certainly could use some improvement. No ghost in recorded history has ever hurt anyone physically. They're real heartbreakers, though. Theo is much more upset in the morning about the supposed sunspot, where Eleanor seems basically fine. And then when they find the writing, Eleanor is very upset and, gets I quite appreciate that they had her be very calm despite the terrifying experience last night, and then, to again, like, if they were constantly at, like, if this is a 10, if they were constantly at an 11, but no, they bring her down to real low, and then they bring it back up when the writing is, And Theo provokes Nell, and Nell dances, and it is kind of creepy, but it's also a little soothing, so we lower our guard, and then the door suddenly comes open. And the camera dollies all the way up to the face of one of the statues and holds on it for just a few seconds so we can sit and wonder if there really is going to be something there, like movement or something. And was there maybe something about that when they looked at it, it was in one state, and then when the camera goes in on it afterwards, it's slightly different. I don't remember the detail, but I feel like I noticed that on a different viewing. Holy crap, that spiral staircase really is dangerous looking. And then Luke starts walking up and starts to move, so he jumps. The movie's really good at lowering our guard and then having something really effective happen. And that actually, are we maybe halfway through the movie when we're introduced to, sorry, not we, but the characters. Obviously, we saw it much earlier. That was when, that was where the caretaker person hanged herself. And Eleanor nearly falls, and as the camera, like, really zooms in, or, not zooms, but moves in on her very quickly. Very scary. And Nell is upset that she won't continue to have her own room, and Theo is more comfortable with the idea. Good scene of the cold spot. I like the detail that Luke points out. If he blows out a little air, they can actually see the mist from. Is that what it's called? The thing. The thing. Excuse me. Very tense scene when the two women are in bed as they talk, and it only gets worse once it gets really dark and there's more supernatural phenomena. I appreciate that every so often the supernatural phenomena will very suddenly become completely silent. Whose hand was I holding? That clip is used in a lot of video reviews of the movie, and it's no wonder why. That legitimately is unbelievably scary. Like, if there is one thing that like really sticks with you, just one, like, the thing that you cannot let go of, the thing that when you're lying awake in bed after having watched this movie, and there's just the one thing that you can't quite. Whose hand was she holding? What, like, so she felt a physical, because it wasn't just this passive thing. She said that she, Theo, you're gonna crush my hand. I get that you're scared, you can't squeeze my hand so tight. You know, that hurts. Please, you know, you can't. You have to be more gentle with it. And then she realizes Theo was like way over the other side of the room. Like, there's no way it could have been Theo. And Theo was asleep during that whole thing. You know, she wakes up and it's like, what? What's going on? You know, so that just, yeah, that's really. Um, I guess that's kind of a spoiler for that movie, so I guess I won't say. I will simply say that I've seen that kind of thing done in other movies, and it's incredibly effective. You know, it's just, yeah. The night my mother died, she knocked on the wall. I didn't come. She blames herself. She feels that if she had responded, maybe her mother could have lived longer, and that really is just, if you feel survivor's guilt or that kind of thing, that is something you have got to talk to someone about. Try to don't don't keep that kind of thing bottled up, because it really does just, you you cannot, that's something you have someone, you know, talk to someone about that or something, because don't keep it bottled up. Excellent editing as Luke reads from the book. You know, the others are established as to where they are in the room so that they don't just suddenly appear. You know, because as he starts to read, I think Theo is in that very first shot with him, and then she gets a one shot where she like turns and pays attention to him. Then it cuts to John, who's like dealing with the fireplace, and then it goes, and he like turns and listens, and then it goes to Eleanor, who's a bit further over in the room, as she starts to pay attention as well. And then, you know, because hypothetically, imagine the scene if we didn't see Nell there, then she just kind of appear as she walks into the shot with the other ones, you know. I don't really understand why Theo treats Nell so badly. You know, at other times, Theo is clearly a good person, and you know, Nell is a good person. She does what she can to be nice to others, even under extreme circumstances. I mean, I guess it's supposed to be that thing of like, you know, if she, like she's gay and she's upset. I guess, yeah. The idea is supposed to be that she's predatory because she's gay, so she's upset at Nell because she can't have her, basically. Maybe she's nagging her. Now who's being stupid and innocent? Burn! Holy crap, you're gonna need some ointment. I tried to warn you. Yeah, if you hadn't been a jackass about it, maybe she would have listened to you. I like that Grace just gave Mrs. Dudley $5 and got the key for the gate. Someone or something opened the door to the nursery. And, like, you know, Grace is like, well, I know where I'm headed, you know. And the audience is like, no, please don't. Because we have, at this point, accepted there's clearly something going on. And, yeah. My neck and back are still sore. Luke again enters a room from an open door, and for the first several seconds we see his shadow. Pounding again, this time it's compounded by the fact that, you know, Grace is outside, so John wants to go check on her. Very nicely done escalation. And this time all four of them can hear it, so it really must be happening. I realize some people might have thought, you know, the other scene, oh, the two women hearing it, you know, it's just they're being ridiculous. It's not, you know. sadly, back then, and sadly still, a lot of men don't take women's concerns seriously. You know, the two men may not show as strong signs of being scared, or at least not for their own safety, maybe for Grace, but they clearly are hearing the pounding. Don't let it get in. Is that line, is the similar line in the Babadook inspired by this, or is it that both of them are, I guess both of them are things that children might say when they're scared of a monster, because it is Nell saying that, and yeah, she does often sound like she's still a child when in some of the things she says, or the way she says them, the way she keeps invoking her mother. The door bending like that is one of the scariest things in the movie. One of, you know, how do you explain that rationally? How do you explain what they see? And again, all four of them see it clearly. There's not, it's not like there's one of them that like looks at the door and is like, what are you seeing? There's nothing there. For those who don't watch this with the subtitles that are in for English, sorry, English for the hard of hearing, I just want you to know that one of the sounds used during these couple of haunting scenes is stealthy scratching, which I personally really like the phrasing of. It's a really good way to describe it. And John realizes the pounding is at the nursery and insists, of course, on going out and checking on Grace. And what's that saying? Nell works out. Yeah, she, you know, in her monologue, she agrees to give the house whatever it wants from her. Nell running through the house is really eerie. They get into the nursery, but there's no sign of Grace. I mean, if she just left intentionally, Grace could have at least said something, or something could at least have said Grace. Nell hums and dances by the statue again. It was creepy the first time too, but now it's way creepier. Where's Eleanor? Underlining that it is not right for her to walk off alone like this. This, you know, what is, yeah. Has anyone checked outside? Why? What did Side do? That dolly trip up the spiral staircase is the stuff nightmares are made of. Such great acting and filming as Nell, you know, climbs the spiral staircase and the thing starts to come loose, and she, you know, she keeps going up despite this. You know, she remains undeterred from climbing further, and she's actually fairly close to the top by the time John asks her to come down. She is calm. It's a good idea to end your horror movie on the scariest scene, and the spiral staircase makes for a very memorable conclusion. Just turn around, Bright Eyes. Very tense as John, you know, what's that say? Yeah, in the process of climbing the clearly unstable staircase to get Nell, and he notices that, you know, that the thing in the, which I think they did a great job. The like there's this thing there's like a nail keeping the, you know, the wall is here. This is the piece of, and the, let's see if yeah, the nail is here, and when Luke gets up on it earlier, the nail kind of comes loose and the thing comes loose a little bit, and you know, it's a little less, it's a little shaky. And then when Nell comes up, the thing comes even further, and John even further, and John realizes, he notices it, And he continues climbing because he can in good conscience. He invited Nell here. He's responsible for her safety. And Nell leans backwards, but John manages to grab her. Holy crap, that was tense. And Nell sees Grace above the trapdoor. Now, it cuts so we don't see the trip back down the spiral staircase. You have to be careful not to push the horror too far. I think it was the right choice. The fact that she looks up and sees Grace's face up there, which is also beautifully done because it's almost in complete dark, it almost looks like it's just her head that's up there, you know, and like or that she's about to fall through and maybe hang herself, like you know, because it's the exact same spot. That so yeah. Now let's see. Nell pleading to stay and admitting she doesn't really have her own apartment is from the book as well. And I suppose I should at this point note, I'm not calling out everything that's from the book. Quite a lot of things in the movie are from the book. I'm not afraid to take a stand. Watching, waiting. They did a great job editing and finding some really eerie shots of the house. They managed to make it feel alive. You know, it is legitimately so scary to just look at these. You know, in part it's the angles. It's not like straight on. It's like from below and up. But it's also just like the windows kind of look like eyes, and yeah. And Nell starts driving, even though we've just been told that the gate is locked. It's such a great. I had forgotten that little bit because there's this build up. She keeps saying, "Please don't make me go. I want to stay here," and the all three of them keep insisting you have to go home. You know, the they accept that she, you know, okay, you don't have your own apartment, but you lived somewhere before, you have to go back there. You know, and let's see. Right. It builds and builds, and you know, she gets in the car, and Luke is like, I'm supposed to be the one driving you, you know, and she says, it's my car, you know, which, I mean, at that point, I will admit, considering her emotional state, I really don't blame, and that's not because she's a woman. That's because, you know, I would be saying the same thing if the character were male, but she clearly, you know, I, you know, basically, Luke is right that it should be someone else driving her because she's clearly not completely, you know, the kinds of things she's said and done recently give reason to believe that she wouldn't completely drive, you know. But yeah, so let's see. I guess they're probably just. I mean, most of the time she ends up getting her way, even though, you know, when she got the car that she and her sister both helped pay for, ultimately she gets her way by what's the word? You know, she doesn't get their permission. Excuse me. She just goes, excuse me, and gets the car anyway. But the let's see. I didn't mention that, but I do really like, you know, she goes and she says, I have a driver's license. Here's my library card, my blood donor card. These have my address. As you can see, my address is the same as my sister's. I'm borrowing my sister's car. That's not a problem. And he's like, that's fair enough. I can't really argue with that logic. You know, the I'm pretty sure all of those cards have her name on it, and as she says, they have her address on it. You know, what is she like, I don't know, I guess hypothetically she mugged the real Eleanor Lance, but, you know, it's getting to be very... No, but no, because her, there's a picture of her face on the, I'm pretty sure, right? On the driver's license, I think those, I don't have a driver's license. I'm not going to go into why right now. I'm pretty sure, so yeah, you know, it's like, here's a lot of evidence. You know, she didn't fake all of this just to get a car. You know, that would be, yeah. Now, let's see. Right, I was talking about the build-up. She says she doesn't want to leave. They keep arguing and telling her she should. She gets in the car, telling Luke, "It's my car. It's not your car." You know, it's slowly building, and Luke is in the car. And then he gets out and goes up to Markway and says, "I need the key for the gate." And, you know, that reminds the audience, the gate's going to be locked. We weren't necessarily thinking of that. But, yeah, the gate's going to be locked. It's locked at night. As the Dudleys have very clearly said. Yeah, I have to wonder if they go through the empty rooms and just give the speech. Sorry, if Mrs. Dudley does that, even when there isn't anyone staying there. But, so, yeah, clearly the gate is locked, and we know about the gate. We know there's no other way, because if there was another way, Nell would have taken the other way, you know. So, what I mean is, if you drive the car through that, you're going to end up at the gate. You're not going to end up at, you know, some kind of open place. And that is clearly where she's driving. You know, we realize that almost immediately. She is for sure taking that path, you know. So, very nicely building towards that. Because there's, like, she's desperate. She doesn't want to... She's tired of other people telling her how to live her life, what to do. Her every move dictated by other people. And, yeah, so she, you know, and I mean, at the end of the day, it is her car. It's not like she's wrecking someone else's car. Yeah, okay, so the car is half her sister's, but, you know, other than that, it's, you know, it's not like, yeah, and, but it's happening to you, Eleanor. Yes, something is finally really, really happening to me. Very scary car crash. And very effective jolt as Grace jumps out. She did kill her. The shock of seeing you is why she lost control. Sophia was capable of being an ass to other people than Nellie. I guess someone had to... She had to target someone other than Nellie, now that Nellie's dead. And Luke points out, to him it appeared that she wanted to crash. And Eleanor gets the final narration about the house, which is again word for word from the book, but in the book, it again is the omniscient narrator who says that. I really appreciate they gave it to Nell, and to be fair, they did actually change one word. The narrator in the book says, "Those who walk, walk alone." But Nell, of course, says, "We who walk, walk alone." That's such a great... It's... I love the book ending. I love the... I just love this movie. I love this movie so much. It's unreal how well made it is, how effective it is. Just holy crap. And I feel like I'm glad that in the book, I think it really works. That it is this sort of, like, we don't, you know, it's a, you know, the narrator or whatever, you know, I don't know, I say omniscient narrator. I'm not sure if that's the right term, because technically the entire book, as far as I recall, is from the first-person perspective of Nell. But in the book, there's no indication that she says the last line or that Markway said the first. You know, but giving them to specific characters really works well for the movie. I'm glad that we don't know who's saying these things in the book. It's a... You know, you have to change some things when you adapt. Let's see. I was so into this movie, I forgot to... Usually I note how long the movie is before the end credit starts. Oh, actually, wait. Is there? I guess there isn't. There's only very brief end credits, right? Because almost all of it was at the start. Now that I think about it, but yeah, with and in total, the movie's an hour, 47 minutes, and 19 seconds, and that brings us to the second section, which is notes taken before watching. This is where I usually talk about what I know of the other work of the people who made this, but honestly, I mean, I know a couple of other the director Robert Wise movies, and the screenplay for this was written by Nelson Gidding, who also wrote the Andromeda Strain, but that's basically what but Robert Wise also did an incredible job on The Day the Earth Stood Still. I haven't seen the Keanu one, maybe I will at some point. I do like Keanu a lot. And I like that director, although he can be kind of hit and miss. And the Andromeda Strain, excellent movie. And, I mean, Star Trek the Motion Picture, moving on. I like Wrath of Khan. You know, what is it, the even-numbered Star Trek movies are good. Sometimes the house really wins. Everything's coming up Hill House. Now, let's see. Yeah, so, as I've already mentioned in the book, Eleanor is very sympathetic. In part of it is of the inner monologue. And, yeah, like, as I've already mentioned, there is some of that in the movie itself, but, I'd say in the book she's even more witty, and she finds herself surprisingly comfortable around Theo and even the two men. And that's a thing where, the movie can't really spend enough time to establish this. And I'm not sure, I don't think the inner monologue ever says it. I don't think it could have really. And I didn't really pick it up in the acting either. But in the book, they specifically say she's usually not really comfortable around people. She's not that comfortable in the diner either. And yeah, at the end of the day, when she gets to Hill House, she finds herself comfortable around them, and they seem to like her fine. At least, she's witty. They don't really ignore her or now. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I find it kind of disturbing. It's not the first time. I've experienced many times when looking at reviews for movies. Read reviews, hear reviewers. Sorry, read reviewers, hear reviewers. At least ones that aren't professional hired reviewers say that they find her character obnoxious when really it seems like she's just very fragile. She doesn't seem intentionally hurtful. It's just all the pain coming out. I mean, I don't know how many of these reviewers realize this woman has felt infinitely more pain than she's causing. Her life is far more agonizing than, your agony of watching her for, under 2 hours. It has always bothered me how unwilling many people are to empathize with those who experience a lot of pain. I'm not going to be an ass and say that it means that they've had less pain in their life. Some people, still. I don't need to end that sentence. In part, it's that some people are hit harder by certain things than others. Some people have extremely different life experiences than others. I realize that for some people it can be very difficult to empathize with people who've had very different life experiences or had a harder time coping with similar life experiences. But that's why they call it empathy and not sympathy. You know, no one said this job was supposed to be easy. I, you know, I realize, understand, and accept that a lot of people don't love the movie Joker, but I do think it can be extremely poignant, such as when he notes that the worst part of of living with a mental illness is people expect you to behave as if you don't. And, you know, I get part of it is that while a chunk of horror movies are about making the audience experience, you know, a situation and empathize with a situation that's incredibly different from their own, another chunk of horror movies are about destroying that which is different. There's even some overlap. Movies that ask you to empathize with someone who's different but demonizes someone else for being different. And yeah, there are times where I don't love admitting that I'm a big fan of horror. Now, let's see. Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, I watched basically every video I could find that talked about the movie The Haunting, and yeah, in one, let's see, I think it's called Why We Are Still Haunted by the Haunting. They point out, we don't see the ghost, and the statues seem to be looking at you. And, let's see, Fatal Film talk about that, you know, point out that it's not clear if Nell meant to crash the car or not. And, let's see. Right, and there's let's see, some, yeah, someone pointed out that maybe she's actually at the hospital and imagines being at the house with hauntings, although apparently the author of the book, you know, yeah, that theory was apparently like, yeah, the scriptwriter had that idea, but the talked to the author and she said that no, it really is about haunting. And the screenwriter saw it more as being about Nell slowly breaking down, where the author of the book said that she saw it as a straight haunting. You know, this is about a house that is haunted and people who experience the haunting. But she, as far as I recall, she didn't mind that he read it as more the breakdown of this young woman, and she felt that she was perfectly content to let them approach it from that, because a bunch of the movie is like, you know, it, yeah, it really focuses on the idea that it is, you know, that it is more that she's breaking down. Now, let's see. Right, and then there is, what does that say? Classic Horror Rewind review. Feels that Theo is too mean to Nell. Thank you. And he thinks Luke is too much of a douche and liked him better in the book. I agree. And I don't have a lot else to say. Oh, maybe it wasn't maybe it wasn't Rob Walker and Doug Walker, or maybe I just watched this other video before it and didn't want to note it twice. But what does that say? Frightfully Forgotten point out about how this movie inspired the Evil Dead 1 and 2, the camera work, the banging noises and such. And okay, so this is a tangent, but I just, it's based on, I was listening to reviews of it, of the movie, and you know, it's this podcast where he talks about the movie. It's not in English, so most people aren't going to be able to listen to it. But near it's a pretty good podcast. I like a lot of what he said. I agree with a lot of what he says. But near, and he spends like half an hour talking about the first movie, and then I don't know. I guess the last 42 minutes, talking about the remake. Near the end of the part where he talks about, 63 version, apropos of nothing at all, he says you might not like this movie if you think that Captain America Civil War's the best movie ever made, which is a really unnecessary slam, and it's also entirely incorrect. I love that movie and this one. Not equally, but I do love both of them. So loving one doesn't contradict loving the other. I mean, I could understand if he said, if you love Michael Bay, and once again, I base that on the movies he made before the Transformers movies. I haven't watched any of those. I hope I never find myself watching any of them. But I have watched every movie he made before that. The right all the way back to Bad Boys, all the way up to The Island, both included. Because there you actually have no substance and it's all style. But Civil War and The Haunting are both movies that have a lot of substance in addition to being strong presentations of the material. So I don't know where that came from. I don't know, maybe he's a purist and he wishes that the movie was closer to Mark Miller's original. See, that's how you do a completely uncalled for slam. Mine was at least on, about the subject that was already brought. Seriously, why? Like, I could or like if he said, if you like the new one, you probably won't. If you like the 99 version, you probably won't like the 63 version. That's probably true. Now, I don't really have anything to say about the commentary track. It's quite good. I feel like a lot of what's there that I would say has already been committed to the trivia section of IMDb, so I'd just be restating. And there's the theatrical trailer, which is excellent and really shows you how the film scares you. And there's about 5 minutes of still gallery, which is not good. Now, the audio book is, let's say, 7.5 hours, just about. And yeah, and the novel was written, or it's right, the novel was published in 1959. And the full title is The Haunting of Hill House, and the author is Shirley Jackson. And she actually, Robert Wise was like, we can't call it The Haunting of Hill House. That is not going to work. Is there any other title that you thought of? And I forget if she was the one or they were the ones who came up with just calling it The Haunting, but they were all happy with calling it that. So I'm just briefly going to get, I'm not going to bring up everything from the, yeah, I noted that it builds, right from the start, builds atmosphere very nicely. There's some really good dark comedy. And, right, and in the book, Elle actually points out a number of times, it's half my car. In the movie, I think she only says it, does she say it more than once? I think at most she says it twice. But in the book, she says it several times, and again, that works really well for the book. I'm really glad for the change. I think it works very well. Now, let's see. Oh, that's right, yeah. I had completely forgotten, but in the book, she drives really quickly, and she, like, there's this old woman who's, like, walking past with groceries, and, like, she drops it because of, and they're both sad because there was a cheesecake there, and now it's lost, and she and there's this internal monologue where she notes how much she loves the freedom of driving by herself, and she just wants to keep driving to the end of the world. And I noted that Eleanor spends a lot of time in her head and imagines fairy tale endings to the life she's lived up to this point, she so badly wants to escape from her actual life. She overanalyzes everything, second guesses herself, feels helpless, and stops at cafes, and there's the thing about having to convince the guard. Dudley. The house was vile, is the first thing she thinks when she looks at the front of it. Yeah, and by the time she actually gets to the house, we're 1 hour into a 7.5-hour book. So, you know, that's, yeah, in the movie, they get her there much, much quicker. And the movie also has scenes that don't have Nell in them, which I also think works well. I think each time there's a haunting that only involves the two men in the book, it's always that she's being told by the men what happened, rather than the reader reading directly what it was. And she thinks to herself, the house was not a place for people, for love. And Theo arrives not long after. Nell does, and the two get along. Theo is fun, easy to get along. Nell talks to Theo about fairy tales, and Theo goes along with it, seeming happy enough to do so. They talk about their childhood and such. Meet Luke. That's right, they actually meet Luke before the doctor. And introduce themselves, to each other, jokingly so. Ella's very happy to be comfortable talking to others. And nearly 2 hours into the book, they ask the doc what he wants them at the house for. What's going to happen here? And the doctor says they're all spoiled, and they take it quite well. In the morning, Theo takes a bath before Eleanor wakes up and leaves the warm water for her. I think that might be I'm not sure I've heard of that elsewhere, but I figure that's probably more of a girlfriend, sorry. I'm not saying there's something wrong. What I'm saying is, I think that's something you do for your significant other. So I think Theo is basically trying to suggest, the water would be warmer if next time you join me. And they joke that it's a bad Halloween haunted house with stuff popping out. And this is, this is before anything supernatural has happened. And they open doors to understand the geography of the place. Yeah, there's a lot of this stuff that they trimmed that really, for a movie that's less than 2 hours, it should not be there. So I'm glad that they were wise enough to trim it. And let's see. And yeah, they argue over who wrote Eleanor Come Home, the first real argument they have. And I'm not 100% certain if maybe this part had some narration by Theo or at least one other character, not only Nell. And let's see, what is that? Okay, so about 5 hours in, the doctor's wife shows up, and she's brought Arthur, a friend, and this is a very big departure. The doctor's wife is very annoying, and Arthur as well, and honestly, I really feel that the character dynamics were much better before she showed up. And I hate when storytellers do that with female characters, and you're supposed to resent a female character for existing, but yeah, she's made really obnoxious. It's really, I wish she wasn't. I'm happy with basically every change they made to her character for the movie. let's see, yeah, Theo and Luke abandon Nell and then pretend they didn't, but it's very clear that they did. And, well, 4 of them make fun of Grace and Arthur behind their back. I forget if she's called Grace in the book, but I'm going to go with Grace. And later, Eleanor hides from the others, and her inner monologue now sounding a lot more childlike, and she seems to identify with the house, referring to the house and her as we. She does seem very happy, relaxed, giddy. So, yeah, that we really don't see. And I guess that's what the dancing's about. The dancing is kind of childlike. That's not something you typically see an adult do. That's more of a child thing. I'm not sure she does the dancing in the book. I think that was something they came up with as a very visual way of showing her childlike. Yeah. Now, let's see. And Nell goes onto the spiral staircase. What does that say? It's Luke who gets her down, while the others are scared and look on. And Nell admits she has no home, stole her sister's car to the others, but they still want her to leave. She eventually reluctantly agrees to go, and she runs the car into the tree and dies, and the book ends right after. We don't see the reactions of the others like in the film, since the book is told from her perspective, and then we have the closing little monologue there. I think both work really well for their respective mediums. I'm glad the book ends just like immediately ends right on the crash, and that the movie chooses to give us the reactions of the others. And I feel like I'm not 100% certain if Shirley Jackson, the author, read the screenplay and what's it called? Gave it the green light, something like that, before they made the movie or not. But I feel like she would probably be pretty happy with how the others react in the movie to the, yeah. Okay, and that brings us to the final section entitled Lines and Times, the time code will line up better. Critic sites, IMDb and Wikipedia. Now, let's see. Right, so this, I believe, is a Rotten Tomatoes user review. The Haunting became the best haunted house movie mainly by showing restraint in its use of ghosts. Unsettling imageries created by clever cinematography and cramped sets. The ambiguity of the supernatural element leaves the audience to wonder how much of what the characters, particularly Julie Harris' Eleanor, experience is real. This uncertainty not only adds to the creepy atmosphere, but also places the majority of the acting burden on Harris as her character's sanity is questioned. She does not flinch from the challenge, delivering an unforgettably frenzied performance. Excellent review. I don't think Rotten Tomatoes allows you to like give upvotes or downvotes to user reviews. I feel like they really should. I would definitely have voted for that one. Now, let me really quickly think. I once, a friend of mine once borrowed this movie from me, and it was he said that it wasn't a very good movie, and I don't think he said it himself, and I didn't say it to him, but I'm pretty sure he straight up thought that there would be, like, visible ghosts, that they would have someone walking around, they changed the opacity so they're see-through or something, and it's just, yeah, I don't know, the movie's not for everyone. Now, let's see. riveting in its depiction of how terror and dread can take hold of the mentally susceptible. Wise's direction is impeccable, with rising suspense and creative ideas to depict all manner of haunting imagery. From knocking thuds, spliced children whimpering, to bending wooden doors, the haunting has all sorts of spooky ideas. I'm not going to make a big deal out of this, but I just have to read. Okay, so this person submitted this review, or they published the review, May 5th, 2019. If we are to watch this film, it should have been shot in color. Even some TV shows were beginning to be shot in color by this time. I do not buy the argument that black and white makes things scarier. Any decent producer has more to work with to achieve what he or she wants to do, and the audience is much better served by an attempt at a real-life experience. The world is in color. Narrowing that down to black and white is a cheap conveyance the directors use to make their jobs easier. In a black and white world, it already is a fantasy. Dude, just admit you don't like black and white. Don't try to intellectualize and rationalize, because you're no good at it. That's such BS. You wish the movie was in color. You're probably not the only one, but it wasn't meant to be in color. It looks incredible in black and white. I hope it never gets, like, you know, there are plenty of movies that are in color. Not every movie needs to be in color. And look, I wouldn't even care if not for the fact that he said that it's something directors use to make their jobs easier. I probably shouldn't say what I'm thinking, so I think I'm just going to move on. But just, may Robert Wise haunt you tonight for saying something so ridiculous. Robert Wise didn't want to put in effort, so he made the movie in black and white. Come on. Please, nobody go bother that. If you know, I'm not saying, I'm just, that just really rings false to me, is all. But don't bother the, don't harass the guy who wrote the review. Yeah, so this person says, I enjoyed, though I can definitely tell this story was a novel first. The story relies heavily on psychological states, which works better with prose than with voiceover. That isn't to say the film is bad, I'm just saying I can't wait to see what the book is like. I hope they did. It sounds like they would really love the book from how they, but yeah, it definitely is. The book really does a great job conveying that, and the movie has a difficult job to do in trying to, yeah. Some of these reviews ultimately say that it does have problems, but the you know, but there are still some really great things about it. Now, and there's a reviewer who says that Eleanor was a psychopath. Do they mean psychotic? I can understand psychotic, but how is she a psychopath? Now, let's see. Right, that brings us to the IMDb stuff. And yeah, I pretty much always these days read the taglines, so I'm going to, even though one of them is long. An evil old house, the kind some people call haunted, is like an undiscovered country waiting to be explored. Hill, Horse. Hill House had stood for 90 years, might stand for 90 more. Silence lay steadily against the wooden stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there, walked alone. At Hill House, the dead don't stay quiet. You may not believe in ghosts, but you cannot deny terror. Scream, no one will hear you. Run, and the silent footsteps will follow, for in Hill House, the dead are restless. These are such excellent taglines, and boy, is that final one cheesy. Wow, that is some vintage 60s cheese right there. Director Martin Scorsese named this his favorite horror film. I guess he would also call Captain America Civil War a terrible movie. I'm not getting into that, don't worry. That discussion has been had. Now, let's see. Robert Wise shot the film in black and white because he loved the depth and rich atmospheric quality of black and white. For this genre of film, I felt it would be perfect to enhance the moody, psychological quality of the story. In addition, the studio contract specified the film must be shot in black and white. He was like, don't let Ted Turner deface my movie with his crayons. Once again, please don't harass that Rotten Tomatoes user reviewer, but seriously, just like, there are reasons to shoot things in black and white. Like, they're just, it's just not the same. Black and white and color, it's not that color is inherently better. Now, let's see. Most of the film was shot through lenses that added curvature to the walls, making the house seem even more strange. Just such brilliant, like, right, here we go. Nelson Giddings' initial concept for the script was that Eleanor had experienced a nervous breakdown and had been hospitalized, and that the house was the hospital, the other characters were staff and patients, and the booms and knockings were the result of shock treatments. The entire story would have been inside the head of a mentally ill woman. However, upon discussing this with the author Shirley Jackson, who simply regarded it as a haunted house story, he decided to backpedal on that idea, but still emphasized Eleanor's crumbling sanity in his final script. I would like to see that movie as well. I don't know if the, like, it's possible that, like, the original script is out there. I mean, there are movies like that, and some of them are very, very good. But the thing is that if I mention one of them, I will be giving away that that movie is set in someone's head, which for a lot of these is the twist, so yeah. If I had a hat, this is one of the many reasons it would come off to Robert Wise. For some of the scenes in which characters are tormented by loud, ghostly sounds coming from the house, Robert Wise had the sounds on playback so that the actors could react to them authentically. It was a technique that they found very useful and effective for creating just the right mood of terror. Absolutely just such a great idea, and it really worked. I mean, I've seen horror movies where, like, you can kind of tell, okay, the actor did not know what they were reacting to when they do a pretty good job, but it's clearly just a guess. What they're reacting to and what we're hearing in the soundtrack are not the same thing, and it doesn't seem like it's supposed to not be the same thing. Every member of the cast enjoyed working with Robert Wise, who had a long-standing reputation as a strong director with great instincts and no ego. Julie Harris remembered him as a calm gentleman who never got ruffled by anything, and Claire Bloom found working with him marvelous. He really was unbelievably talented, and no, I'm probably not going to be watching his musicals. I'm sorry, I'm not into musicals. I don't have any kind of, I'm not saying it's like there's something wrong with being into musicals. I'm just saying I'm not into it. I already admitted that I love comic book movies, so it would be kind of ridiculous to act all high and mighty about musicals. Now, let's see. But I might watch some of his non-musical movies. And I don't think I said before, I think he did the best he could with the Star Trek, the motion picture, motion sickness. I think he did the best he could, and it's one of those cases where I'm sorry, Gene Roddenberry could sometimes kind of sabotage his own work on Star Trek sometimes. He got these ideas and insisted that this would be the way to make it, and I mean, it's kind of a spoiler to say which one it is for that, but I would say Robert Wise did the best he could, and I think elements of the movie are excellent. Ah, right. Some of the, let's see. Yeah, there was a scene where, like, Theo and her female lover just broke up, and Wise, what's that scene? Yeah, he cut the scene. It seems like it was never filmed. I'm not entirely sure, but he felt that the film worked hard to make things implicit, and he thought it was too explicit for the film. However, according to Julie Harris, film censors demanded that Theo never be shown to touch Eleanor in order to keep the lesbianism obvious. Nevertheless, they touch several times, including when Theo is sitting on her bed. The theme is reinforced when Eleanor calls Theo a mistake of nature. Let me just briefly underline part of that. The film censor said that it was not okay for one woman in the film to touch another woman in the film. We're not talking about like a kiss or a hug. They were not allowed to touch. That's how, wow. Like, like, how scared do you have to be of gayness to not think it's okay for two people of the same gender to touch in a movie? That's, wow. with the majority of the film's action taking place inside the house. Yeah, this doesn't really specify. I figure what they mean is as opposed to over a series of locations. Robert Wise took the time to build suspense slowly and deliberately by paying careful attention to each scene. By keeping the small cast together in the various rooms of the house, Wise emphasized the claustrophobic nature of the story, which helped to increase dramatic tension. Julie Harris agreed to do the film in part because the role was complex and the idea of the house taking over Eleanor's mind was interesting, but she also chose it because she had a long-standing interest in parapsychology. According to Robert Wise, the spiral staircase provided some unique challenges. It was scary when you were up on that thing and it was rocking around the Christmas tree. The one shot we did on it that fascinates people the most is when the camera is at the bottom and goes up. We designed the banister of the stairway to be so wide and thick that it would fit a small rig with wheels on it, a little light dolly that would hold a handheld camera. We had our camera on that, and we had a control wire underneath all the way down. Excuse me. We simply took the camera up to the top on this rig, started it, rolled it down, and then reversed the film. It was all done on that balustrade. Such talented, people working on that. I don't know. That might have been the cinematographer's idea. I don't know if that was Robert Wise's personal, but such a clever idea, especially because the moment that you start reversing film, it gets this unnatural kind of, like, you can tell when you watch footage that is being shown in reverse. You don't always think this is reverse footage, but you always think there's something wrong here. That is not natural. Human beings do not move like that. And if they could have done it without reversing the film, I don't think it would have been as good. I really, because it is like, when the whole thing is it going down, so instead of it going up, it's like, it's just this, it has this really eerie, creepy quality to it. Robert Wise called the film one of his top 10 or 12 favorites among the films he made, commenting that it was his favorite filmmaking experience. Very cool. The screenplay made many changes to the story. The number of characters was cut down, the backstory was significantly shortened. Most of the supernatural events depicted in the novel were kept off-screen, and the greater part of the action was set inside the house to heighten the audience's feeling of claustrophobia. That's actually, that's very true. In the book, some of the creepy stuff that happens is when they're outside, and that's just not in the movie. Like, at one point, the two men run off to chase a sound to go outside, so they're far away from the pounding noise. But other than that, like, yeah, in the book, there are times where they're outside, and that almost never happens. Like, the closest they get to outside is maybe going onto, like, the balcony or something, but other than that, from the moment that Eleanor enters the house to when she leaves there at the end, which happens right before the movie ends, she's always inside the house. There are a couple of times where, like, a door will open to the outside, but no one leaves. No one actually goes out there. That's very effective. Eleanor's role as an outcast was also emphasized. The character of Theodora was given a sharper, slightly more cruel sense of humor in order to make her a foil for Eleanor, also to heighten Eleanor's outsider status. The role of Luke was made more flippant, and Dr. Markway, Montague in the novel, was made a more confident character. Yes, that's very true. In every movie where there's a dangerous animal caged up somewhere, there's always one person who's stupid enough to put their hand in the cage or box. And then there's a shocking scene where the animal starts to bite their arm off. And then it gives some examples. I'm not really gonna... Let's see. Although I do appreciate that it spends a little chunk of this really hammering home just how stupid that bit is in Prometheus. How this person did not like that, at least that part of Prometheus for sure. 0 out of 5 found this interesting. Whatever. I guess they're Prometheus fans. I'm kidding, there could be other reasons. Anyway, yeah, so there's a scene like this in The Haunting, where Eleanor is reaching out to hold Theodora's hand in the dark as the evil force menaces them, and she's squeezing and twisting her hand too hard. Later, when the lights come on, Theodora told her it was never her in the first place. Yeah, so this is the IMDb goofs. Character error. For scientist, Dr. Markway exhibits an astonishing lack of scientific curiosity regarding the help Eleanor come home, writing on the wall they discover. He tells Luke to wipe it off the wall without even taking photographs of the writing or samples of the chalk-like substance used to write it. And the IMDb quote section notes that Eleanor Lance saying, "My mother," is a repeated line. Now, let's see. Right, so this is the IMDb frequently asked questions. Who was haunting Hill House? Many viewers think that it was Hugh or Abigail Crane who was haunting Hill House. Others have taken the view that Hill House wasn't haunted at all, that everything was either a hallucination on Nell's part, or that Nell was responsible for making it look like a haunting because she loved the attention. It is also implicit that Nell has latent telekinetic powers that are running berserk because she's having a nervous breakdown, and some viewers believe that all the paranormal events in the movie are the results of Nell's subconscious psychic powers. In Jackson's novel, however, it was Hill House itself that was evil, although no explanation is given as to where the evil came from, just that it has always been there, and that the evil of Hill House will continue to claim victims whenever it wants them. Now, let's see. Why, this is from Wikipedia, Wise heightened the sense of character conflict by having the characters step on one another's lines, allowing one character to begin talking before the other had finished. On occasion, the characters simply talk at the same time. And yeah, this is from, sorry, this is still Wikipedia. This is the section called Home Media. In 1990, media mogul Ted Turner announced he would begin colorizing black and white motion pictures to make them more pleasing for audiences watching his cable networks. The announcement generated extensive controversy, touring Turner's colorization facilities as a member of the Directors Guild. Wise learned that Turner was colorizing The Haunting. Wise was able to prevent the colorization by pointing to his contract, which stated the picture could only be in black and white. That's great. I really hope no one ever, like, there's an audience for it, I'm sure. There are definitely people who will watch this movie only if they can watch it in color. And I'm not saying, there's not, like, I usually prefer movies in color. You know, when I was a kid, basically every movie there aren't that many movies that have come out in my lifetime that have been in black and white, you know. But this movie just works so well with it. You know, some movies should be in black and white, and yeah, but I don't blame anyone for not, like, there are definitely movies that I've been told are incredible, and that I just have a hard time, you know. Yeah. Let's see. I think that pretty much, yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Some of the silent movies I've watched, that's silent movies have to be incredible for me to like them, which is why I'm so glad that I've been able to watch Metropolis, which is an absolutely incredible movie. And I realize not everyone will feel that way, but, and I should also say, so far I've only been able to watch the 90-minute one, so I don't know if I would feel the same way about the longer version. One of the things I love about the 90-minute version is how, like, just the incredible pace it keeps to. And I can imagine that it wouldn't be able to keep that pace if it's substantially longer, but it is also just like if you haven't watched any Fritz Lang, you have got to at least watch a little bit. Just what that man did with the camera is unreal. The kind of shots he does in Metropolis, like I guess, okay, I'm not gonna give away exactly what's happening, but basically, a lot of characters are looking at one specific individual, and that specific individual is really giving, like, they can't stop looking at that person. And in addition to a few very standard kind of just straight on shots, just, the entire, the entire head, you can see. He's got some shots where there's, I don't know, maybe 20 eyes, put together in the one shot, and it just has this effect of, because it's not just supposed to convey that they're looking at this thing. It's supposed to convey that it's practically driving them crazy. And I don't think I have to work very hard to convince you that seeing like 20 eyes in one shot really conveys this is crazy. This is not a normal, soothing, calm situation, and that one shot where, like, you see the people at the machine, and then you see this, like, grinding, just exquisite. His camera work, exquisite. And not everything he made was silent. M is not only yeah, what do they call it, talky, as it's, you know, today you don't have to specify that it's a talkie. You either say that it's a silent movie or you just say it's a movie and people assume that it's not silent. But back then, talkies. M is a talkie and actually uses sound incredibly well. I forget who it was that said it, but someone pointed out that I guess that's kind of a spoiler. Okay, I'm just gonna say that it uses sound incredibly well, and it's an incredible movie. And I don't have Fritz Lang on my list right of I don't currently have any Fritz Lang movies on my list of movies to do videos on. I'm just not sure I know enough about the period because I have not watched that many movies from back then. I really don't want to, just have no idea what I'm talking about. So currently, sorry, it's not on my list. But I guess that is. Let me. I'll try not to leave a lot of dead air here, but let me just think. I think I've said everything I wanted to about Nell, Theo, Luke, Markway, differences and similarities, book, other people. I guess just briefly, I saw that some said that basically the movie is a lot of talking, or that it has some parlor tricks by today's standards. I guess I just feel that I think I'm sorry, but I feel like they want the movie to be something that it was never meant to be, and if you don't like this sort of movie, that's fine. I don't really think that the movie, the way it was made, I find that I didn't always, but I do now feel that that's an extremely important way to look at a movie. What is it trying to do? And are there things it does poorly in what it's trying to do? Are there contradictions within? For example, is there stuff in the movie? Are there like major plot points in the movie that don't really make sense based on the rules that the movie itself sets up? That's a really major. That's much bigger than saying that this or that thing that's in a fictitious movie, and a movie that isn't claiming to be a documentary, saying, oh, that wouldn't happen in the real world. Well, it's not the real world. At the same time, don't get me wrong, like if a fire-breathing dragon showed up in a Bourne movie, then I'd be like, okay, that does not belong. But when you look at what the movie means to be, I feel that this movie, I think it is worth making a I think you could make a version of this today that would remain implicit, but could do some things that this doesn't. But I don't think that yeah, I could see like a movie made today with a big budget. You could have more different sounds when we only hear sounds, and you could maybe it would be interesting to make the movie as like I mentioned earlier. There are some horror movies that are just from the very start to the very end. It's always scary. It's never not scary. The movie doesn't really have downtime as such. I think it might be interesting making a movie like that, but I don't really want one where there's a lot of effects. And once again, some of my favorite horror movies are drenched in. Actually, I'm not sure I have said that before, but I'm saying it now. yeah, see, I did not write The Thing. I can't imagine The Thing without its many effects. And I don't, I would never say that they're the only good thing about the movie, but they definitely are important to the movie. It's not just like Flash. It really, they are extremely important. And this is a man who could make horror movies with almost no effects. Watch some of his other horror. I don't want to. Yeah, I shouldn't give titles. Watch some of his other horror movies, and you'll see make you he could terrify you with almost no effects shots. Like when you really think about what some of his horror movies managed to do with almost nothing, but so it's not that I'm some purist who says that you should never have, strong effects or strong graphic violence. I just don't think every horror movie needs to have it, and I guess I get it, but I don't think it's accurate to say that this movie just has some parlor tricks. I get that there are, yeah, and to be fair, the person who said that did say that that was basically what they had back then. But he basically says, sorry, they basically say that if ah, the field of horror movies have come a really long way since they made this movie, and yeah, I guess they basically feel that the this had was that the review that also said this mostly has historical value. You can see this and see how far we've come. I just don't agree. Like I already said, I watched this the first time in 2010, at which time The Thing was my favorite horror movie. And the like I forget if I've watched it since, other than right before recording today. But yeah, it's terrifying. It's incredibly effective. I really don't think that it's. I feel like it's reductive to say, but the person didn't try to. They didn't try to tear the movie down or something. They just and they're entitled to their opinion. Let's see. I don't think that the movie has too many conversations, but the ah, yeah, I'm not sure I have much to add about that. I just don't agree, but I could see why some people, and they're not wrong to think. It's how much it matters to. I mean, I hear other people say, Christopher Nolan, he makes such talky movies. There's way too much talking and dialogue in his movies, and I'm like, but it's well written, it's well delivered, it's well directed. So what's the problem, But so I'm probably not the best. I'm not the don't ask me whether a movie has too much talking, because I am probably not going to give you an answer that you're gonna agree with. There you go. If you somehow manage to make it entirely all the way through this video, or if you skip to the end, that's fine too, and you still don't know, if you want to watch this movie or not. I don't think it has too much dialogue, but I don't think Christopher Nolan movies have too much dialogue either. This movie does not have as much dialogue as a Christopher Nolan movie, but, I could understand why, today it maybe feels like too much, you know, what's that Elvis song? The movie needed a little less conversation, a little more action. And, yeah, I get it. I just don't agree. I'm not gonna say that the horror genre has lost its way, because, to be fair, I don't know for sure. I'm not watching a lot of the most recent horror, and I have heard that a lot of the most recent horror movies are actually incredible. So, now I think it was probably more that there was a bad period, and we're now past that. I'm sure bad horror movies are still getting made. I feel like every so often I'll hear someone talk about them on YouTube, but some really incredible horror movies are also being made these days, so that's great. It actually, I mean, fans of the horror genre, we fans of the horror genre can, I mean, there was some incredible horror from right after people started making movies. You know, I haven't watched, crap, what's it called again? Uh, Nosferatu, I feel like it's called, with Count Orlok, I want to say it's called. I haven't watched that movie, but I have seen clips, and holy crap, that looks terrifying, and I get why, you know, yeah. Was that one of the movies where people passed out in the theater or ran away from the screen because a train was coming directly at the camera and they didn't understand that it wasn't literally coming at the... I can understand that. I probably, yeah, it looks absolutely terrifying, and yeah. So, you know, and there have always been people who say, these horror movies, they're no good. But then, you know, yeah, there are some bad ones, and like, for sure, the 80s had some bad horror movies, and there were also some incredible ones, you know. And it's not like this is the only good 60s horror movie. I absolutely love, I can't believe I'm blanking on the name, Rosemary's Baby. That's one of my favorite horror movies ever. That is one of the scariest movies ever made. There are not many movies that are as scary to me as that movie, and that is just, yeah, holy crap. So let's see. And you know, I actually, is it a month from now? It's in a little bit, but I will be doing a video on Blue Sunshine, which is from 1978. So the 70s also had, well, okay, I know not everybody, some people really can't stand that movie. I remember loving it while admitting that there are definitely problems with it. I think that's probably how I'm going to feel again when I watch it again to review. But I think there was a while in the 90s and early 2000s where I mean, it ruined so many movies, seriously. And, you know, that is one of the things, as far as I understand. I haven't watched it, probably never will, but as far as I understand, that is one of the problems with the 1999 The Haunting. They felt that there should be visual effects, and this is just not the right story for visual effects. This is the perfect story to have everything implied, and yeah. I guess that pretty much... I do at this point feel like I need to... Okay, let me think. There are horror movies that show very little that needed to show more. I did not write down a specific examples. Let me see if I can think of one. Otherwise, I've seen, you know, sometimes there are some TV channels that will censor, that will, you know, they'll remove a lot of the especially violent stuff from some movies that they're airing, and when they do that to horror movies, sometimes, you know, I don't think a horror movie needs to have violence, but the violence can often be a sort of release of tension. You know, there's just, it builds towards, you expect there to be something violent, and then there is something very violent, and it is this sort of release, you know. A lot of fiction, part of it is catharsis, and when something violent happens in fiction, you know, our brain can go through you know, without us actually getting hurt, without anyone getting hurt, in fact. And now I feel like I need to just briefly say, I don't think, you know, I think that there are definitely some people who have a hard time distinguishing real violence between violence and fiction. And I don't think that children should see violence that is, you know, beyond what, like, Disney animated movie has or something. But I don't think all movies do need it. And it really, the way that the horror works is, you know, like, you know, I already mentioned The Thing would not work anywhere near as well without the horror scenes. Sorry, without the gore and violence. Now, I guess that is basically, yeah. So let me think if there's any final little thing. I'm pretty sure there isn't. But let me just very briefly. Yeah, I think that does fully cover it. I do think, yeah, in closing, I do think that this is a movie that you can watch for the first time today and enjoy it. It depends on what you expect from a movie like this. You know, I get it. Like, there are periods that I have a hard time watching movies from. You know, and honestly, if I had not been watching movies from the 60s since I was a kid, maybe I wouldn't have been able to get into this when I first watched it. So, excuse me, I'm gonna try, excuse me. Okay, just very, very quickly, in closing, let me say that if you have access to streaming service, one or more streaming services, I feel like that's how you, it's the plural, and you don't have to watch a movie that's more than a few years old from when you're watching it. Maybe you'll eventually feel like anything older than that is just bad because it isn't quite as fast or as, you know, it doesn't look quite as good as anything you've watched that's more recent. And maybe you would actually find that you enjoyed something older if you did step outside of your comfort zone, and maybe then, yeah, I think that's pretty much. I'm not saying that every negative review of this is based on people just not being used to saying that it's, you know, not every, this movie is not for everyone. And let me think, did I end up finding a single negative thing to say about it? I'm not sure I did. So there you go. Uh, I can understand why others might not like it. That might be the most negative thing I can say about it. Unless I said something else. It's been 2.5 hours. I don't remember everything I say in these videos. So, that is it. I have had it. I have had it with this video. And I'm pretty sure you have too. So, I'm kidding. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed watching.